Hello there. It's been a while since I've done a movie review. Unfortunately, cinemas are still not open, and most of the films that are being released on streaming platforms are so awful to the point where I generally just don't finish them or even have the urge to talk about them. And I know I sound like a boomer, but most films these days aren't like what they used to be. There's no passion when it comes to filmmaking anymore. All studios do insert a whole bunch of politics, agendas, and all sorts of nonsense that should not be in any film. But I remember the original Quiet Place took me by surprise. It was a film that was so simple yet worked so well. There was a horrible attempt from Netflix to copy this film, but of course they failed miserably as most of their content does. Can't exactly remember what the name of the film is. I'll just put it up somewhere. And I have to be honest, A Quiet Place was one of my inspirations for even starting my channel, talking about movies. Because I felt like that was what filmmaking was all about. Just using such a simple concept and story and just taking every element of it and making it so effective. They did such a good job to entice their audience, to care about the story, the characters, and even appreciate the little things like the camera work, the details of using a leaf as a plate, walking barefoot, for example, right? All in the original. And it's just the little things like that that really excites me. A Quiet Place Part 2 has once again impressed me, and it takes a lot for a film to impress someone as picky and judgmental as I am when it comes to films, of course. To those of you who know me personally, know I hate a lot of films, and for good reasons. And it takes a special kind of enticement and intrigue from a movie to keep me sat down for the entire runtime. A Quiet Place Part 2 was supposed to be released initially last year, but due to the pandemic, it came out about a month ago. And in this story, we get just a little bit more lore about where these creatures came from, and right from the opening, I was already hooked. The camera work once again is excellent. I just love it when they linger on the characters, interacting with the world, getting in the car, running away from these creatures. And I don't quite understand why people enjoy this fast-paced, quick-cut camera work. It is so painful to the eye and you just don't see what is going on. So I don't quite understand why so many directors are still using this sort of camera work in thriller or action films. Just stop. Just stop, please. So John Krasinski once again does really well in directing this film. In terms of story, it's kept simple once again, and I'm glad that they did. Now, I did notice some reviewers kinda complain about the story, the whole plot being very similar to the original, and there are some similarities, but I would still consider this as a sequel because there is a development in the story. There's a development in certain characters. The first story was more of them just surviving, and one of the core plot points of the story was also how were they supposed to handle the baby situation, how were they supposed to deliver the baby, how were they supposed to keep the baby quiet, right? So it's more of survival in the first story, and this one it kind of developed to we gotta get away from these creatures, we gotta find a safe place, right? So for me, I would consider this as a proper sequel. So Thomas Shelby, aka Cillian Murphy from the Peaky Blinders, as most of you know him, is essentially one of the main characters alongside the little girl. And the story was essentially divided into two subplots, and this unfortunately led to Emily Blunt having less screen time, which is unfortunate because she is one of my favorite actresses. But that's just my personal preference, right? Because I'm a fan of Emily Blunt doesn't mean I get to have what I want, right? But I still think both the focus characters did really well. So once again, the little details that John Krasinski inserts into his film is really, really good. For example, there was this one scene where it was an emotional scene. Cillian Murphy was kind of just talking to the little girl, and he kind of just looks away and starts talking. And as we all know, the little girl is deaf. So how is she supposed to understand what he's saying when she can't read his lips, right? So the little girl kind of just tilts his face towards her so that, she can read his lips. And I know for a fact most directors wouldn't even put the effort to respect their audience enough to kind of remember that we have a deaf character. So every scene that these characters are interacting with each other, then she needs to be able to read his lips, and they made sure that they never forget this. And I know a lot of directors would not care about this. They're probably just too lazy, or they just have the perception that their audience might forget, that this person is talking to a deaf person. But not John Krasinski. It's the little details like that that really, really makes this movie like stand out above the others. So usually when a film has child actors, it can be worrying due to the acting, but once again, the kids do really well. Generally, I think the story is strong. They gave Cillian Murphy's character a really good reason to go along with this little girl on her journey, a journey of redemption. And there's good character arcs with the little boy. And I said before, the story doesn't really focus on Emily Blunt, so she's just doing her thing as an amazing mom and taking care of her kids and that baby, of course. And I still can't believe they decided to have a baby under these extremely dangerous circumstances, but it really does help with the tension. And you could say that having the baby was just a way of replacing their youngest child that they lost in the first film. So yeah. And speaking of the tension, once again, this film just excels at building tension and suspense. To me, this is the definition of what a thriller film is. The way they build up these creatures, the way they make these characters force themselves into making mistakes. This is how you properly suck your audience into this world, right? And there were multiple scenes where my heart just started beating really, really fast, as if I just went for a run, because that's how suspenseful so many of the scenes were.
Get inside! Get inside!
So if I were to give this film a score, and I know scores don't matter, it's your personal opinion, right? If you enjoy the film, you enjoy it, but it's just to kind of give a rough idea of how solid the film is.
That's what she said!
So if I were to give this film a score, I would say it's a 9 out of 10. Solid 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, and one of the reasons being there are some similarities with the first story. It's not a major issue like most people are complaining about. I still think it's a proper sequel, and there was one cliche moment where a character saved another character, conveniently of course, before being mauled by one of these creatures. So I don't really enjoy TV shows or movies that do this cliche, like, oh, I'm going to save you at the last second. Just stop. So this film did it only once, which is fair, but still I find it as an issue. And other than that, one of the major issues is what happens in the third act. And my thoughts on that particular act is, what are the probabilities of that happening? Like, what are the odds, right? I'm not going to spoil it, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So that really, that's a pretty big issue in my opinion. But other than that, the acting, the directing, excellent camera work, the visuals are really good. Everything worked really well, and yeah, a really entertaining watch. And I think the most important question that we need to ask is, was this sequel necessary, right? To me, I would say no, but I'm glad that they did make it, especially now in just the sea of garbage being released. This is really refreshing to watch. Even though it wasn't needed, I'm glad they made it, right? So yeah, definitely go watch it. Really entertaining, really good tension, really good acting. And yeah, I think that's about it. And as always, thank you for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.